about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Warrior Creed. I am the radical Maajid Nawaz, and just there on the other side of the screen is my brother, the infamous Usman Raja. Our guest today, as you can see, that is the hologram that's beneath me right there, is our brother Hotep Jesus. Brian, welcome to Warrior Creed. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm broadcasting live from Tatooine. I am part of the Jedi Resistance. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
We had a previous guest on last week, right? And I said to him that out of the new Star Wars films, the ones that I liked, this is our friend Carl Benjamin who was on. He goes by the name Sargon of Akkad. And I said to him that the Star Wars films that I liked, that reminded me most of the original Star Wars episode 4, 5, and 6 from the modern collection that's come out recently and also relatively recently as well, what were the prequels and the sequels. I named Rogue One, Mandalorian, and Boba Fett, that for me felt like they were the closest to the original feel of those movies in 4, 5, and 6. I don't know if you've seen those all three. I've just started Obi-Wan, so I can't comment on that one yet, though it still feels slightly in that vein as well. But I would say to you, Mandalorian, Boba Fett, and Rogue One. And my friend Riz Ahmed, he's a British Muslim brother. He was in Rogue One. He was the defecting stormtrooper. You know that, Usman, yeah? Riz Ahmed was in Rogue One. Yeah. He was the stormtrooper that brought the message to the Rebel Alliance, that the defector, basically. But I don't know what you think, Brian. Which ones? I don't know if you follow those films, but considering I thought you do.
Yeah, I just completed Andor.
Yeah,
that one was really good.
Okay.
Mandalorian I enjoyed. Rogue One, is that the movie?
So Rogue One is the movie, but Andor is the prequel to Rogue One.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay.
And I imagine for that reason it's also in the similar kind of feel that the originals had.
Yeah. I really enjoyed those. When I had COVID 2 years ago, I sat down and I watched all of the Star Wars movies, starting from, I think it was 1976, the first one, and then on through Empire Strikes Back or whatever. I love that series. The new stuff, obviously, with the technology they can do, CDI, et cetera, immerses you in that world a lot more. But I did enjoy those series. Yeah, Boba Fett, I didn't watch. I don't think I took in Boba Fett yet, because sometimes you get reviews and like, oh, Star Wars series, Disney bought it out and they ruined it, and you're like, which one am I going to watch? So I kind of wait for the people to give me recommendations. So they recommended Andor, so I watched Andor. That was really cool. So if you guys say Boba Fett's official, I'll definitely check it out.
I mean, what do you think, Usman, man?
I'll go into a complicated one with this, but the recent things, Mandalorian. Obviously, I like Boba Fett because of we talked about the deeper message in that from the perspective of like the native populace and someone coming in the voice of the native populace.
We're live, by the way, so it worked. Carry on.
Oh yeah, I was just so. But what I'm saying with this, so what are we calling what am I calling you? Was it Brian? Are you called
that's
Brian?
fine.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, the thing with this stuff is, Brian, exactly the stuff that all of us are always talking about, which is that myth that's put across. The myths that are put across inform the people about themselves. Do you see what I mean? And if you're getting a certain type of myth that's being put across and it's degrading, or there's a point here where the term undermine comes in, where you've got this thing of the foundations that you're standing upon aren't firm. So what you think of yourself is what's being fed back to you. And I remember, even as a kid, even though I love the old Indiana Jones films, but there's a scene in there where the archaeologist that's working with the Nazis comes in. And he's talking about the Arabs, and he goes, "Yeah, they all they just kill each other." And I'm watching, and I'm going, "Oh, so they've been pushing this since then."
Yeah, bro.
Let
me also add to that, Usman. One of the reasons I imagine that you will appreciate, brother Brian, the Boba Fett storyline is that if you think back to the original 3 Star Wars, the Sand People, as they were referred to, who dwelled in the deserts, they were only portrayed as marauding thieves and killers. And yet what Boba Fett does as a story is it explores the journey of Boba Fett and how he connects back to to the indigenous peoples of the desert, who were otherwise known as the Sand People, and learns the greatest wisdom in the form of samurai-style martial art wisdom. You know, the spiritual zen that comes with practicing or mastering a martial arts. And Boba Fett learns that from what are known as the Sand People. And actually, what you realize through that storyline is how they view themselves is anything but the perspective we had. Of course, they're looking at it from an alien force coming and occupying their homeland. And so there's a very interesting. So Boba Fett then learns this wisdom from them, and he becomes this unstoppable, but also very spiritually balanced hard man. He leaves his previous life. I don't want to give you too many spoilers, but anyway, the point is, I think for that reason, you may appreciate considering we're having this conversation, you may appreciate some of without losing any of the original feel of the movies, and without having any of the modern day gimmickry that they try to introduce, or even ruin the plot lines where they try to inject themselves into original myth that we grew up watching. So without any of that, what they do in this Boba Fett is it's done in a very intelligent way. It's not done in a crude way, but it makes you appreciate what were otherwise known as the Sand People in a very different light. And why that's important is because, as we know, Usman, you know this too, right? The original storyline of Star Wars, a lot of that was inspired by Dune, Frank Herbert. And Frank Herbert in Dune, his whole point, which recently the movies they made, but the original books, his whole point was to reflect on the spice that was being stolen from the deserts, which is the metaphor for oil. And that the Messiah was on his way to save the people who had been otherwise occupied by this, again, alien force that was interested only in exploitation. And so that's what originally inspired the Star Wars idea of, a lot of the ideas behind that. So I think it's very important, I think, what they did with Boba Fett to have that timeline kind of come from the perspective of what was only known as the Sand People up until that point.
No, that's a great sales pitch. I'm gonna have to check this out now. I'm like, I'm invested now.
Yeah, but you see, it's interesting because what Usman just said now about the way in which we see ourselves in the myths, and that's why it becomes important that these myths are, whether it's myths of stories of movies we grew up watching, or actually traditional ancient myths that inform our very sense of identity and self. It's why it's important they're preserved, because they inform a sense of self, and we see ourselves in them, and we find meaning in that. And it's why it's so dangerous to mess with them,
Or to homogenize them, so you get your pattern with it. Do you understand what I mean? It's like that's what I thought it was going to be. That's why when we were going to do the show today, and I did the research on the brother, and I was like, oh, he's talking about the same stuff back from the 90s days. I was getting off. Don't know if you've heard of Dr. Abdul Hakim Quick. That this came back to the 90s. Abdul Hakim Quick, he's a brother of African American descent, and so we're talking about back to the 90s now, on the streets of London back in the 90s, kufi caps, kicker suits, and at one point we even had the Wu-Tang kicker suits with the goofy caps and the. Do you see what? So, but we're talking about London in those days. If someone said to me, they said to me about Islam in those days, and the confidence we had in those days, it was like that. We were like a wildfire in dry grass. But the thing with Islam is, if you know the Islam of, it's about brotherhood, regardless of if you're. There's no such thing as being outside of it. You're not outside of that brotherhood, whether you're wherever you call yourself. Do you understand what I mean? Whatever label you put yourself. But one of the points, the strongest points made then was about Mansa Musa, Mali, Uthman Dan Fodio and his rebellion, and even going all the way back to, and it was a complicated one. He used to. I'd really recommend anyone that's listening as well to see if they can hunt it down. But Dr. Abdul Hakim Quick, and he used to go into the history of Egypt, 10,000 years. But we're not talking about Egypt. He used to go to East Africa, so starting with Sudan, and talking about the fact that from Sudan going down, and that there was two kingdoms there, and then there was. Now I'm probably remembering it wrong, but it was like I remember it Manas or something like that was the name of the king who united the. And this is 10,000 years ago we're talking about. Do you understand? And he was going into the difference with this is in the 90s we had the East African diaspora from those days. Yeah, so brothers coming from Somalia, yeah, and. I always say, I don't know if I ever mentioned this story to you, Maajid. I was, I'm like 17 years old, doing store detective work. I don't know if you know what store. Yeah, but at 17, that was a good little number. You used to. So I'm doing store detective work in Canning Town in a place called Summerfield, yeah. And these are when the first Somalian brothers were coming over, and there's a Somalian brother there, Abdullah. And I'm speaking to him, oh, brother, yeah, but how long you been here? Because I had that deep connection in with the community. And the brother told me about how his sister had been drowned in a fountain. I mean, this is among all the rest of, we start off the conversation friendly. And one thing I remember from that first day of impact was I'm upstairs having my lunch. Yeah, I'm sitting upstairs, I'm having my lunch. The alarm goes. I come downstairs. And Abdullah's pinned, white tattooed up, tracksuited up, shoplifter at the checkout. He's just pinned a guy, and I'm going, okay, you know what? Even I would have been, has the guy got a blade on him? Has he this? He's just pinned him up there. And I was like, okay. Do you understand what? But at that time, it was like all the right information to understand your brothers coming in. And you know you know how I am with that community, Maajid, with Wahhabi and all the rest of the brothers with that. Do you see what I mean? But it's like one thing I always talk about with this is all people want is dignity.
Yep.
But if you treat them like you're doing them a favor when you're probably eating the rice that's from their fields or eating when you look around, you go, wait a minute. Where are these mangoes from? How come when I walk into this shopping center, I've got a cornucopia around?
I'll give it more visceral. Where's the coffee they drink every day coming from?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where's that coming from?
But this is the thing.
Brother, we should bring our brother into this conversation.
Yeah.
Fine. We had a contact a few months ago. Forgive me, by the way, because it took me a while just to get around to it. I'm happy we're finally on here together. But I've been looking at some of your political commentary, and it's been interesting to me. And your view on a lot of the evil that is around, especially in the current establishment, as represented in the US by the Biden administration, but here in the UK as well, we have our own problem. And your reflections on that have been, I think for me, one of the reasons that I felt that it would be good for us to speak. What is the situation like? Because now I see that his health, his mental well-being appears to be completely deteriorating. So what is the? I mean, I don't understand how they think they're gonna run him again. But what's word with you guys? How are you viewing that situation now? What's your latest with that?
I view politics from a financial standpoint.
Mm.
So um I'm really concerned about how the economy performs, how the markets perform. Uh, we see that there's been a takeover of the House and the Senate by the Republican Party. I expect that to continue on into the executive branch. I don't think the Democrats have a strong candidate that can beat Trump, Pence, DeSantis, or anybody else that the Republican Party would put up. So I haven't paid much attention to the Democratic side of things. There's speculation that Joe Biden's being railroaded in relation to the documents, classified documents at his residence or something like that,
Yeah.
and
They
basically
just
trying
found
to
they just found
disqualify
some in
him.
the home of just now before we came on air. I think it was Mike Pence. They've just found some more. They just found some more classified documents. It's like they're lying around everywhere.
So they found some on Mike Pence as well.
Yeah, this is it. Here we are. As Inside Paper reports, breaking classified documents found at Mike Pence's Indiana home. Maybe there's some lying around behind you as well, brother Brian.
I think I might have a couple of documents here somewhere.
I mean, what is this? How many were found on Biden?
Yeah. The thing with that is I understand that President Obama issued an executive order in 2009, I believe, uh, that basically loosened these restrictions and created some leeway. So when I view these stories, I don't view them as being important. um you expect that if somebody had access to these documents, I think the one thing is security of the documents is important. I know they said Obama has some documents, but Obama's have a high level of security in a storage facility. So I think security is the issue with the documents, but I don't see them as anything more than something for the media to profit off of, something to keep people engaged in politics and the charades and the what do you call it, the drama of things. But it really has very little to do with the people. So when I see things like this, I see them as distractions, so they don't have to talk about the real issues like the economy, the markets, FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, central banking, poverty, the failure of the Democratic Party with inner cities, et cetera, et cetera, unemployment, homelessness, just a complete and utter failure of political prowess to manage the economy. In fact, I believe what we have is an over management of economy. If I taught an econ course and they asked, how would government deal with the economy, I would say they shouldn't, you shouldn't touch anything. The more you touch it, the more radioactive, the more unstable you make it. So I wouldn't interfere with it much at all. I would love to hear somebody's opinion on when it makes sense to touch the economy, and how and in what sector. But for the most part, when I think about it, I think that it's sort of like a pendulum. You have to let things swing back to the other side naturally. Markets fix themselves. And I think when you try to fix the prices, you damage the economy. For example, when we had the pandemic hit and they were talking about people were price gouging on Amazon, and they said, well, we have to fix the price of hand sanitizer. And I thought to myself, that's a very bad idea. Supply and demand will find an equilibrium price. But at the very least, if people are gouging on hand sanitizer, I think what that does is it removes people responsibility. because hand sanitizer is something that you can make in your house. You know, you can go get the different pieces of that. And I think what they are afraid of is people becoming self-sufficient. So if I go get the alcohol and gel, I have hand sanitizer. It's just alcohol and gel, you know, and if people figure that out, it could damage an entire industry uh, until it comes back to a point where it makes more sense to just buy the hand sanitizer than it is to make it, right? So again, allowing the economy to self-manage, but I think they manage the economy as a means to virtue signal and say, hey, look at the good we're doing, when really the uneducated people have no idea what bad they're doing to the economy.
So when you say you're looking at this the whole episode through a financial lens, where do you think the money's headed? Because you've got a Republican takeover of the House now.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
seems to me like
So
that's not a momentum that's gonna stop anytime soon.
yeah, so there's always a swing in markets, right? So I think we had the tech bubble of the 2000, we had the housing bubble of 2008, and then we have our crash of 2020. So it seems like this thing is on like an 8 to 12 year cycle. Um, some of it we can speculate is manipulated, and some of it not. But I don't want to talk about that right now. We just understand that there is a cycle of ups and downs with the markets. So, being that 2020 was the down, I expect a recovery. The question is how fast that recovery comes in. My speculation is that we actually get a recovery with the Republican presidency in 2024, and things booming and coming back to life. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that we had the pandemic, and the pandemic dropped things below zero. So we're in like a negative state. And when uh, the media reports and says, hey, we have a growth in jobs, et cetera, all these different things, really what they're saying is we're making our way back to zero. The question is, can we get to 1, 2, and 3? And I think, being optimistic, I think we'll get that in 2024, 2025, if not several years after, if we follow the cycles. There's a very great book on this by Benjamin Graham called The Intelligent Investor, who basically teaches you to, buy on the lows and sell on the highs, obviously, which everybody knows. But he has the trends bookmarked in there historically from the beginning of the stock market. And if you look at that, you can sort of see a political cycle in there as well. So cash rules everything around me. That's what Wu-Tang said. So politics is all about money. Um, there's speculation about different House representatives and senators getting rich off the stock market because they have insider info. You have money going overseas to the Ukraine to support their war efforts. Everything revolves around the dollar. We just had an omnibus bill. We also have, people creating programs. Where there's programs, there's budgets, and then there's a want to sustain those budgets. So like Sonny Johnson says, the Democrats paint themselves as the party of the poor, but you can't be the party of the poor if there is no poor. So you have to keep a poor class in order to be the party of the poor. So a lot of this stuff is about sustaining problems and not really resolving them.
Brother, have you looked at? You mentioned FTX. I imagine you're referencing the money laundering cycle that went from the Democrat federal government funding of the exchange FTX, and then funneling back through the central bank in Ukraine back into the Democratic Party via FTX. A lot of that loop was a money laundering scheme. Now, Sam Bankman-Fried obviously has been arrested for that, and the investigation is ongoing. But the problem here we've got is everybody that thinks Sam Bankman-Fried was the mastermind of that operation doesn't understand how even half of what you just described works, let alone understands the kind of character that it would take to be the actual real power behind an operation that dangerous. And you see that Sam Bankman-Fried and the man that he appears in front of the screens is absolutely in no shape or form the kind of man that you would require, or men, to orchestrate that level of a laundering scheme on a geopolitical stage, it being that dangerous as it is in the middle of a war. Sam Bankman-Fried is a child, so he's nothing but a front man. But you mentioned it a few times, and of course he's the patsy now. He's going down for it. But the people behind all of that are still engaging in attempts to continue taking your federal money and our British pound here. Even just now, Boris Johnson, our former prime minister, was there encouraging everybody to allow Ukraine to join NATO, which would mean World War III, by the way, because there's an ongoing war in Ukraine. I mean, I don't understand this, Usman. If Ukraine were to join NATO, Boris Johnson just asked for Ukraine to join. If Ukraine were to join NATO today, we'd be in World War III tomorrow, because Article 6 would have to be triggered. It's an attack on one member, is an attack on all members. Ukraine is under attack because it's a war zone. We're just going to have to go to war with Russia if Ukraine joins NATO. It's an absolutely insane suggestion.
Yeah, but because what we've got right now is that, listen to Brian speaking there. It's like Brian's coming from that level of where the rest of the brothers are coming from, which is like there's a normalization. Yep. And like we know with us as human beings, we want a bit of permanence, we want a bit of normalization. Yep. But the reality of this situation is we've just gone through a situation where they've pumped whatever chemicals they mandated the pumping of whatever chemicals into people's veins, where there's a whole load of people out there walking around damaged. Yeah. But also on top of that, you know as well as I do, Brian, it's like I remember because of having grown up a certain way, I look from the bottom. I've always got that thing, look below you to know what the reality is, not above, because what's going on above you, you're always, if you got a yacht, someone's going to get a bigger yacht. Yeah, but there's a saying we got in Islam that go to the level of the poor man and then raise his level up. Yeah, and I remember when I was over in LA training LAPD and being shocked by the poverty just on the streets, but then also when you travel around the US, you get to hit like certain sectors of it which look third world. Like literally, that. Do you know what I mean, Marge? I don't know if you
absolutely.
Like, yeah. You go in and you're like, man, this is supposed to be.
There's the tent cities and stuff, isn't it? In LA, man. I went to that tent city. I saw it for myself.
No, but there's also those like little towns where you go in and it's just like there's a third world aspect to it. There's stratas of, but obviously when we were in New York, we're getting that treatment of the booked restaurants and all of that. All of a sudden, when I'm out with Brian, checking out you get to see something different. You get to see the different stratas of what's going on. And from what I've heard, you remember the other day that we had with Brian on the phone, he was saying, yeah, things have changed up here a lot, that the divide's got more. Now, the point I'm making with this is it's like the veils come off on a lot of this, on a lot of that normalized reality where even when we're looking at the speculative market itself, we know that the people that are playing those games, but as soon as the lid's been lifted off that, we get to see the ridiculous corruption. So the guy who's cleaning the shopping mart, his efforts was paying for the no effort for that 50% speculative economy where all the money's sitting at the top. And the issue with all of this is that's why they bring in zombies like Biden. I mean, you've had Biden, and I made this point before Biden, when you had Obama bail out the banks with the people's money, the people are so afraid of the people are so afraid and so atomized that if you tried to pull that shit back in the 60s, for example, you would have had people out on the streets.
Yeah.
You would have had you, and I'm talking about the normal man would have come out and gone, okay, you can't take my money to bail these crooks out. Do you see what I mean? But the problem we've got right now is this comes back to everyone's got their little hustle right now. Everyone's got their hustle where whether it's like conservatism, wokeism, ism. Do you understand what I mean? Whatever bullshit it is that they're running. Because the thing is with this, Brian, if anyone wants to check my stripes, you can go check my stripes and go meet the biggest bloody your biggest release terrorists who have reformed themselves, who came and hunted me down while I was there on your streets to come and sit and talk. Do you understand what I mean? But I'm only coming from serving my sheikh, who's serving Allah. Because we have this saying, we fear no man, we only fear Allah. You probably heard this saying from Muslims before. But the point I'm saying with this is that what we're seeing right now is you're seeing all of these little hustles where we're talking about the identity and the activism, but the thing we got to do is everyone's going down with this ship. There's a saying that you can be having the party.
The ship is going down, by the way. The ship is going down. Yeah,
and I'm telling you, my brother.
Right? Have you been following their attempts to bring in these central bank digital currencies? Yeah. Well, how long is it going to last? Until you get to a scenario where we've now got in the UK, in Oxford, they've started zoning the city, right? And they're called 15-minute zones. This is a WEF plan. Yeah, we had a friend of ours on this show 2 weeks ago, David Fleming, and he was on the Jake Shields episode. Just after Jake, which was our premiere on Rumble, David Fleming appeared to speak about this, but that episode had some interference on the sound, so we couldn't have a good conversation. But ultimately, and by the way, we put a clean version of Jake's interview up, so it's still there. But David's we couldn't clean because it's too much work. But what he basically said to us is something we can convey now to you as well. Is that the Oxford, they basically started to zone the city into 15-minute zones with cameras in each of these zones. This is like real life Hunger Games style shit going on, right? And then if you leave more than, this is the proposal that is passed and they're currently trying to implement it, but they haven't built it out yet. If you leave more than your zone, more than I think, if memory serves me correctly, 100 times a year, then you're fined because the cameras will snap your registration plate and you're fined. And then, of course, once you're in those zones, everything you need, you're told, is within 15 minutes. So you've got no reason to leave the zones. Now, imagine that combined with what Tony Blair just said at the World Economic Forum, if you caught, when he said, and again, he's our problem. He was created here in the UK, but he said that the infrastructure needs to be set up so that we, the state, know who has been vaccinated, and we know everybody's data. We need to set up this digital ID so that we can have that data on everybody. Tony Blair used the word setting up an infrastructure in that context. Now, that's something that we warned of on Rogan a year ago to this month, using the very word infrastructure to say this is what they're going to bring in. Now, Blair has just said it at the top of the pyramid at Davos in the World Economic Forum. Meanwhile, on the local level in Oxford, they've started already to zone the city up into 15-minute zones, right? And so if you end up in a situation where Blair's proposal comes in, which right now, let me tell you what's happening, is that the World Health Organization is currently, right now, debating and passing this notion, this proposal, completely unelected bureaucrats, right? But because our countries have subscribed to the World Health Organization, what they're passing in their meeting right now to talk about this, and this is actually an emergency situation, is that they will give themselves the power to declare a global pandemic, and countries that are signed up to them will no longer have the national decision to lock the country down as they just did in COVID, but in fact will be told when to do it by the World Health Organization on a global level. Now you combine that with what Tony Blair said in the 15-minute zones in Oxford, and you can begin to see how they are attempting to put us in free-range farms for the purposes of keeping us within trapped zones. And if we then say or do something that on a social credit system that upsets the powers that have already, say, cancelled us from higher up in this zoned version of life, then our freedoms can be restricted. Combining central bank digital currencies, you can switch those off, by the way, because they can be programmable. So you could switch that off if you try and leave your 15-minute zone. So you can't pay for anything. Now, where I am in East London right now, we just received an email. I won't give you the name of the bank because it's my private banking personal information. But the bank I bank with, the very last branch that exists in the borough that I'm in, and in London, a borough is a zone, right? And I'm in an East London borough. The very last physical branch of the bank I'm in just shut down. And this is a major bank. It's not some small name. Right? So there's no more physical branches of the bank that I bank with. I have to do everything digitally, right? So you combine all this power that they have. Imagine they can switch all of that off like that. If you say the wrong thing about where the black man came from, for example, they can switch it all off so you can't even trade. That's what Usman's talking about, that ultimately what's going on up here, in a sense, a lot of it is the rats, right, scrambling for the bits of the crumbs that remain. When this whole thing is going to come crashing down, they're already setting up the alternative, which is the central bank digital system, where we will be totally enslaved. It's called technocracy, you know, and that's what we really have. Brian, what do you think, bro?
Sorry, when you listen, it might even sound conspiracy, normal, like from a
your sound.
Is my sound? Am I back? There.
Yeah, your sound.
He's cutting in and out.
Yeah. Let me throw it to Brian, Usman, while you're fixing. Let me throw it to Brian while you're fixing.
Let me jump back in.
Yeah,
give me 2 seconds.
Brian, please. He's gonna try and fix that problem.
So several things to unpack here. Number one, the us versus them dynamic. Us being subjective. If you're at the top, that's your us. If you're at the bottom, that's your us. So what's good for us might not be good for them, and what's good for them might not be good for us. And this is the power struggle that's taking place right now.
Yeah.
Power, as you can take a look at Soviet Russia, for example, communist Russia is entirely about control over the people.
Yeah.
Then there's the my background is in software, particularly digital marketing, and in that realm, I think about people. Well, real fast, let's just dial things back. When I talked about money before, I talked about economics, and in economics, it's the exchange of scarce goods and resources and services, right? So the planet's greatest resource is human beings. Anybody's economy is human beings. We're the things that make these resources rotate, ebb and flow. So if you're the controller of a country, just like you would track your crops, growth and death, et cetera, you want to track your human resources as well.
Yeah.
So that leads into, like I said, the digital marketing realm, where if a user comes to my app, I can better service them or not service them by following the analytics. And that's how I think they're viewing this thing is to have better control over your users, aka human resources. You apply some sort of digital analytics system, put that into place to keep control over people. Now, to go back to the us versus them dynamic, there are going to be people exempt from the controllers. the way I view the system set up is it's the intellectual versus the unintellectual. Whereas you have some people who go into a court system and they commit the same crime. One person does time, the other one walks away scot free. Why is that? Because one is operating at a higher intellectual capacity than the other. Sometimes that intellectual capacity is purchased. Um, so when I view the future of money, you're going to have some people who will completely operate outside of the paradigm of central banking digital currencies, the US dollar, etc. We have people currently who operate completely independently of the US dollar. They transact 100% in cryptocurrency, and because they do so, they pay no taxes. Um, so uh, the way I view it is the controllers, they usually have a problem when you start messing with their cattle, the unintellectual, when you start trying to free those minds, as some people would say. And you're very successful at it. You get the Alex Jones treatment, you get the Donald Trump treatment, et cetera, et cetera. Because that's where the competition is, right? You're stealing their stock, their cattle. Um, However, we have to take a look at organizations. You talked about WHO, WEF, governments. All these things are organizations. When we look at history, we have various organizations. One of them being um, the Gotti family, um, the Bloods, the Crips, uh, Sinaloa cartel, right? Organizations are going to operate much different than the hoi polloi will, much different than the unintellectual will. And it is that togetherness that's going to insulate them from the ramifications of decisions made by governments. That's why I enjoy being part of Hotep Nation, because in our organization, we're able to bring minds together to circumvent some of life's problems by pooling our resources, whether they be intellectual or physical, and trying to make the best for our families. So when I think about, what's happening or what's going to happen, fear doesn't enter my brain too much. I'm not fearful. I don't see this as being unique. I don't see CBDC or the tyranny of the power players as being unique, a unique space in time. It just feels like, mismanagement by Caesar. Um, or by Caligula. If you look throughout history, you're going to find dictators, emperors who sought control over the doing the right thing. So I don't see our situation as being unique. Therefore, I'm not fearful. And I know that some people, based upon organizations, will be exempt from the greater calamity. Um, it's, people, they make it seem like this whole Illuminati thing is some huge conspiracy, and to me, I don't think it's absolutely a conspiracy, but I think it's smaller or less significant than people purport it to be. uh, and that's because of loopholes. There are loopholes. I think the issue is that people spend so much time focused on them, that time is lost focusing on us and organizing us. You do have to pay attention. We do have to discuss these things like Davos, et cetera, et cetera. But I think sometimes families spend uh, so much time focused on the problems that they don't spend any time at all focused on the solutions. If we know that the CBDC is coming, okay, well, what's the solution to that? How do we circumvent those issues, et cetera, et cetera? How do we organize? And, so I just wish people could create a sort of balance in their life. to, and like, for example, like when we talk about the documents, right? The documents, it's a fun thing. Leaked documents, okay. Like the Twitter files, right? Everybody's like losing their hair about the Twitter files, and I'm like bored and ready to go to sleep because it's just like insignificant to me. Like, of course these things were happening. Like if you didn't know these things were happening, then you are one of those people that are cattle. You are the unintellectual class. um I used to, at one point I tweeted out, I said, how many Fed bots have you argued with today? And this is way before the Twitter files came out, because I could see particular responses to my tweets, and I'm like, all right, this is a Fed account, this is some, you know
100%. Yeah.
3-letter organization tweeting this to me, trying to disparage or um discredit um whatever idea it is that you put out
This is what we
into
get.
the
This is what
atmosphere.
happens. That's from Instagram. That's what happens if you,
Yeah,
these,
exactly.
this is the shit that goes on. Yeah. Um, Usman, you were trying to say
No,
something.
no, no, no. Alhamdulillah, what Brother Brian's just said there, with he's broken down circle of influence and circle of concern.
Yeah.
So it's what you can affect. Like what Sheikh's, yeah, it's from the Deen, isn't it? The idea that you affect what's around you. Do you understand? And your circle, and while you're affecting that, there's what you're concerned about. And as long as you're affecting what you can do in your circle of influence, and this is the whole point I was making, Brian, is like the reason this is being talked about on here. Now, normally, to tell you the truth, if I was, I don't know, like 5 years back, well, actually 7 years back, while we were making an impact, things were happening at a certain level, and but I hadn't yet fully seen the corruption that's present there within the government structures. Because the guys that speak to you, Maajid ran a think tank informing the British government. Do you see what I mean? Informing ministers within the British government. I worked
Not just
within
British, globally.
globally, yeah. So prime ministers and presidents. I worked at the highest level within counter-terrorism to a point where I was a keynote speaker at West Point Military Academy, trained at LAPD, New York counter-terrorism intelligence, and prisons as well in the US. Now, the point is with this, it's once you start seeing what's going on. So you could say that this platform here is a platform of awareness, but from the circle of influence level, which is where if you're doing what you need to do, you're looking straight forward and you'll see the arrows hit you in the chest rather than surprise you and hit you in the back. But then what it comes down to with that is
Those arrows are coming. Those arrows are coming for all of us.
but the good thing with this is the excellent thing that Brian was talking about there was the Hotep Nation aspect. Bro, could you elaborate on that? Because I love hearing about.
Yeah, we want you to speak more about the Hotep Nation and your affiliation and how your experience has been, because we are keen to learn.
Well, what is purpose of life? What is the driving factor for humanity? What creates happiness? Creation creates happiness. Whenever I consult people who are dealing with anxiety, stress, and depression, the first thing I ask them, outside of other basic questions, is when was the last time you created something and then shared it with the world, right? And often you find that when they're in a depressive state, it's been a while. They may say, hey, I used to knit, but I got away from that 6 months ago for whatever reason, right? And it's like, well, you need to bring that back into your life, because Ted Kaczynski talks about this in his paper about industrialization, about how even now with automation, human beings are finding that they're working, but they're not finding fulfillment from their work. You go to your job, you come home, and you're not finding fulfillment. So you're seeking these dopamine hits through other means like social media. So when you have these reward centers in the brain, you can get a false sense of accomplishment. You might believe that because you tweeted something and you got 1,000 retweets, that you've accomplished something, you've done something good in life, just because your brain understands that to be activating a reward center in the brain. But actually, you've done nothing.
Mm.
So what we talk about at Hotep Nation is the creation of things. What did you create? What did you work on? Did you build a house today? Did you put together your AR-15? Like what did you actually do? What did you bring into this world that didn't exist before? What new idea? It's one thing to say, hey, there's a trending topic and everybody in the world is talking about it. Here's my opinion. It's another thing to say, here's my idea, and your idea trends, right? To create the trending topic of the day. And that's really what I focus on my Twitter account is, how do I create a parallel trend to what it is that people are talking about? And that is what makes me a leader, so to speak. Because you don't have to just follow whatever the trend says to talk about, although that is very lucrative, but then you end up in a place where you become a slave to the algorithm. So with Hotep Nation, it's about brotherhood. It's about, hey, this guy has just released a new report, and we want to get it out there into the world and help him sell a lot of copies, and therefore he can feed his family, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's about like, what did you create? What did you actually bring to other people that's going to be helpful and useful? One of our key monsters is Hotep and Build. Like, yeah, things are happening in the world, but what are you building to counteract that? For example, I work with Syscoin, and there are things happening with the CBDC, but cryptocurrency is actually a form of freedom where you can transact. You can create, it takes literally like 10 minutes to create your own cryptocurrency, and you and your people, your community, can absolutely transact in this currency as long as you all agree that it has value. That's how money works. Just people have to agree that it had value. At one point, seashells had value. What
Yeah.
intrinsic value do seashells have? Like next to nothing, right? So you just have to agree on those things. Um, for example, when we talk about communists, I hear a lot of people saying, "Hey, I'm a socialist or I'm a communist, etc., etc." Well, the root word of communist is commune. So, what are you doing with your community or your commune where you guys collaborate and create um, co-ops? Right? Like, are you do you have an internal economy amongst your people? If you don't like the US dollar, what does your internal economy look like? Are you bartering? Are you doing this? Or are you trying to force other people's your ideas on other people's ways of life? And that's never cool. I'm always of the thought of, if I don't like XYZ, then I'm gonna go over here and do ABC. For example, I didn't like the way school was going and they were teaching my children, so I homeschool them and I teach them myself.
Yeah.
And that has a tremendous influence on their future, their behavior, their mindset, et cetera, et cetera. So, for example, like when we were talking before about control and control over a populace, I don't know if people would even like me as a dictator, because I would want a lot of control, mostly because the world is so chaotic. If we looked at the small country of United States of America, right, and we said, they made me dictator of the United States of America, we are in such a decadent state that it would take drastic measures to bring this thing back around.
Yeah.
Like like some of the first executive orders I would issue would completely abolish the Constitution, right? Like freedom of press. Like, nope, that's gone.
Yeah.
Like, like if I'm dictator, freedom of press has become a problem. I'm going into the CNN building and arresting people. I'm going to Hollywood and arresting people, right? Because even Ayn Rand talks about how Hollywood was pushing communist ideas
Mm.
through theater, right?
Yeah.
Through film, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going into the OnlyFans headquarters and arresting everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going into big tech and I'm arresting everyone. Like you would not like me as dictator because I would want a tremendous amount of control. When we talk about book burning, there are books that I would absolutely burn. I'd burn down everything that Playboy ever put out into the world. It would be archived in some basement somewhere, right? Like the Vatican takes ancient art and ancient literature
Yeah.
and archives it in their basement and nobody has access to it. Um, so with that in mind, I think to myself, well, how are they thinking? Obviously they're thinking based upon how they would like the world to look. And if you have power, you can shape the world however you want it to look. And obviously what they want is to control people for their benefit. My idea is to control people for the people's benefit and then liberate them of their own Marxist culturalism. And once the people see what we don't have a political issue, we don't have a financial issue in America. We have a culture issue in America. Andrew Breitbart famously said, "Politics is downstream from culture. Everything is downstream from culture. Culture even shapes economics. If the culture says decadence and debauchery is bad, you completely eliminate whole industries. They'd have to go black market, underground, et cetera, et cetera. This wouldn't be accept. And these industries and markets would be shaped differently. Would they still exist? I believe so. But they won't exist how they do now. And really, what you're trying to do is you're trying to help the kids. If adults want access to that material, you're going to have to go through loopholes, VPNs, and all this other stuff to get access to that material. But we're not going to make it easily accessible. The type of debauchery that exists on Instagram, although I'm a male and I love seeing beautiful women, I understand what that can do to a young man's mind and his brain and hitting certain reward centers. You know, once upon a time, if you wanted to see a beautiful girl and interact with her, you had to leave your house. You had to become something. And now you're able to do that, pay to
With no
play
ambition.
with
With
no
no ambition.
ambition. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it comes back to those reward centers in your brain. And once those reward centers are activated based upon certain actions and behaviors, you keep doing it over and over again. And it becomes a loop. And once it becomes a loop, it becomes a habit. And that's who you become. And then that spreads to the greater society. So when I think about, how, I operate in this world, I don't operate from a place of do this, do that. I just be, right? I be what I think other people should be because people don't do as you say, they do as you do. So I try to be the best version of myself whenever the camera is on or off. And I think it's more important to be the best version of yourself when the camera is off, because then it's authentic and it's genuine and it becomes effortless to be that when camera's on. We're also talking about purity of thought. There are going to be sinful thoughts that enter your mind. What about recognizing these things, forgiving yourself for having them, and thus eliminating their ability to spawn? Because you have to accept that they're going to spawn.
If you love yourself, that becomes easier.
Facts. Absolutely. Well, loving yourself is where it all begins, right? You have to love yourself to want to do this stuff. If you don't love yourself, you won't make the effort to do these things.
Yeah.
So you have to, you definitely have to cherish
Allow
yourself and
me,
not from a,
you mentioned Breitbart's culture is, politics is downstream from culture. If I may, I've added something to that based upon the reflections Usman and I have on this show, Warrior Creed. And that is that, yes, I, for a long time, have agreed with that statement, by the way, that politics is downstream from culture. But the moment we're in now, the conversation we just had, and the conversation that I believe is needed, especially for our communities these days, is this, and then the addition. Culture, politics is downstream from culture, and culture, I believe, is downstream from spirituality. If we can fix the spirituality element, the culture follows from what sits above it. And yes, culture sits above politics, but spirituality sits above that culture, and that is also downstream from sense of who we are and why we're here.
And the root of all of this, the thing is that we're diagnosing stuff. What I've noticed with this is like, and I agree with you, Brian, from the level of, look, I homeschool, I've got 6 kids, all homeschooled. Yep. My wife is a psychiatrist, but she's also a hijab wearing Muslim sister who's a matriarch within the community. At her young age, she's one of the deputies of our
and also went into the prisons, right, bro?
Yeah, dealt with the highest level female terrorists and even male terrorists as well. Yep. So the thing with this is, Brian, if you hear the voice of a firm brother speaking, this is not. There's been no playground stuff with where we've been at with this. But one of the things I've got to see with, and when I say if you come to London, you go. When I refer to our community, it's always been a point of I'm in all the. If I'm speaking to a Nigerian brother, I'm speaking to him about the fact that we discovered the distance between the Earth and the Moon way before Galileo, and we were scholars in white robes, smelling of all the attar the people used to write about. Do you understand? Now the thing is, why? Because all my teachers, when your teachers are that, you become that. Do you understand? When you sit with your teacher, and I've come from a certain type of lifestyle where there was a whole lot of racism, but there was a whole lot of brotherhood. Do you see what I mean? But what I did with that is when you go out hunting for the truth. Yeah, when I say read Malcolm X's autobiography and then found a brother you might have heard of, Khalid Yassin from New York. He's one of the known students of Malcolm X as well. Now, or brother Siraj Wahad, you'll know about from these are old school Muslim brothers from that area. Yeah. Now, the point that I'm talking about with this is those were my first teachers. But then one thing, as you start moving on, it was looking into this thing of going, okay, well, if we're going to diagnose this illness, we got to start looking at the fact of, okay, like the Cartesian reality in the West with subject-object, then our people who, the reason they weren't colonizing and the reason people might go, but they weren't so technologically advanced. You go, because I don't need an umbrella if I don't have rain. If I can relax in a thobe or in one garment and chill and be clean and relax, then I'm not going to develop X amount of things. Yeah. But if you start looking at like cultural dominance or cultural hierarchy from the perspective of being able to invade, and even being able to invade from a point of view of where it isn't coming man to man, it's coming from a level of, I come in, I hustle this group, speak to this group, go, oh, you know what they said about you? Go, no, I didn't. Oh, they said this. And we'll give you some weapons.
Sowing the seeds of fitna. Sowing the seeds of fitna.
Yes. Divide and conquer.
Yes.
Yeah. And what you start ending up with this is, as you start looking through the history, you start going, oh, wait a minute. So what is civilization? What is deep culture? Instead of this like passion, provision, possession, look, then go, I love a beautiful woman. What's a beautiful? You're like, well, what's a beautiful woman? I go, my mother, my wife. But you know what? The wife becomes more beautiful when you see her with the kids and you go, oh, wow. And you see. And the thing is, that divine beauty, because I see what you're talking about, when you're talking about the idea of like manifestation. Because there's the idea that the human being, the will, the wisdom manifests, and there's something divine, the aspect of like that there's a word we call sakina, the tranquility. Yep. And this is a word that belongs to Africa. This is a word that belongs to the concept of tranquility being how, because we're all interconnected. We're not separate. But the problem with this is when you bring in the ugliness of that separation. Now, what is it that we've got nowadays? All of this, like everything is feeding appetite. And if you look at the concept of what the Greeks used to call a daemon, where the word demon comes from, it's about the appetite that becomes empowered and translates itself through this. So there's an analogy given of if you took a piece of bread and it had fungus on it, and you saw me and you went to me, bro, don't eat it. And I was like, and I ate it, and then I was like, I feel ill, I feel itchy, I feel tingly, and you'd be like, yeah, but, and I go, oh, it's the fault of the fungus. You go, no, but you ingested it. Yeah. So what it's saying to you is that this idea of like whatever it is translates itself through this. So the appetite, when it wants something, will justify whatever means. That could be the big fat guy on a diet who gets hungry and makes whatever excuse to eat the fast food, or the pervert who is now more predatory than the greatest predator that you can find out there, that will hunt down what it wants in whichever way it wants for its own sole benefit. Yeah. And this is what comes out when you start looking into this and start seeing, well, okay, the first point of making this easy is the Cartesian philosophy, which has never existed in the subject object, moving from there to the concept of Jacques Lacan's mirror self, and then you start moving. Once you start breaking all these things down, these are very alien to that to that African thought that you're talking about, where you might a term that's become very popular now, the Ubuntu term, where it's about oneness. But brother, but do you know the breathing exercises to empower the right hemisphere of the brain that actually create that oneness, which we do it's called zikr. Well, most Muslims
zikr.
Yeah, remembrance, but they do that. Like, remember, we've been doing the training to it. So what I introduced to these guys just last week was the mental exercise during their MMA classes, where we had zikr on instead of normal beats, and then concentrating on one rhythm of the zikr. Well, okay, this bit is the alamiya, meaning the divine manifestation, and the liturgy here is the dunya. These are all terms that you'll find in the dictionary of the African brothers. And dunya means the apple that is just out of grasp. So it says to you the noise,
that's right,
and then the heartbeat.
Because in Arabic, it's from the adna dunya, right? The lowest is the apple on the lowest branch that is just within reach. The lowest level is what it literally means in Arabic, dunya.
Because the things that aren't talked about is, we're not going to get into a color scheme thing with this, but if we were to, what color was Moses? What color? Yeah, and when you start getting into the dignity of that it's interesting, because he's the same color as the skinnies that are getting shot in Black Hawk Down. He's the same color. Do you understand what I'm talking about? When you talk about dignity and character and understanding, and what was the message from Moses? The message from Moses is the idea of challenging sorcery, the idea of challenging what is false on the outside.
The illusion. That's correct.
The illusion.
Yeah.
And this is a very interesting time now.
Let me bring Brian back in for his reflections as well. I see you thinking there, brother.
Yeah. Well, let me touch on what you said before about spirituality. I always challenge this idea of separation of church and state as being a very bad idea. again, hypothetically speaking, if I was dictator of a country, um, we would establish a state religion, and anyone not abiding by that religion, not practicing that religion, would not be a citizen, would not receive the benefits of being a citizen of my state. We would have an established religion that you would have to follow. You could have any sub religion under that you want, but our religion will be the primary religion of the land. So I definitely agree what you said about that. On the aspect of color, um, I believe in tribalism based upon color. I believe that white should be with whites, black should be with blacks, Arab should be with Arabs, and down on through. And I believe this is a very natural phenomenon, um, because as much as people want to purport that, if you bring an outside group into an in group, that they're going to treat them equally, the human brain doesn't work like that. The monkey mind just doesn't work like that. For example, if we did an experiment and we gave everybody red shirts and we introduced two people with blue shirts and just kept them in a particular place, it could be a beautiful island, doesn't matter where it is. The people with the two blue shirts will be ostracized from the group 90% of the time, whatever it is. The majority of the time, they will be ostracized from the group, and they will start grouping up, and those two people will be friends, et cetera, et cetera. If you did the same thing with one person, they would be the out group. So I definitely believe in in-group, out-group dynamics. So I do believe that if anything is going to happen, particularly for the black race, it has to come from the black race. I don't think they can mix with other groups and find any upward mobility. Same thing with all other groups. Chinese need to stick with Chinese. Russians need to stick with Russians, et cetera, et cetera. But especially when it comes to phenotype, you'll even see a divide in the community between light skin and dark skin blacks. And it's very much a monkey mind thing. You look different. And then you can even get deeper into the different phenotypes, cranial structures, nose structures, lip structures, et cetera, and it can get deeper. Whereas all the big lip people will be on one side and the small lip people will be on the other side. But again,
But where, in your view, is the line to that, brother? Where should the sensible line be drawn? Because it can go on forever.
yeah, yeah, that's the point I was about to get to. Um, the line uh, is drawn way above the physical realm. Um, so we'd have to just be in a higher state of ourselves. Um, it would need a ton of conditioning. Uh, at this point, it would take a natural disaster, like a huge natural disaster, cataclysmic, maybe an alien invasion, something like that sort, to make people extinguish all of these stereotypes and preconceived notions. A minimization of population. Um, but you would need, I know there's groups such as like the Lumerians, Atlanteans, if you believe in the story of Atlantis, et cetera, but they talk about these groups that operate at a higher capacity than we do now. They operate at a very high level of spirituality. These people are conducting things like telepathy much easier than we do, because we practice forms of telepathy all the time. But they're doing it consciously as opposed to unconsciously. That's the state that humanity would have to rise to. And at that point, um, some of these technologies that we have now would become useless to us.
Have you
Um,
considered any of the reflections of Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, formerly known as Malcolm X, when he went to the pilgrimage and returned, and some of his visions on how he was able to transcend his own arbitrary line, because I believe ultimately the line where it's drawn is going to end up being arbitrary.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that transition he made, and I think it's ambitious, yet impractical. Um, I think in the individual lives, it is very important uh, to not operate off of the monkey mind. But as a collective, I think that you need to operate and move as a unit, as a group. For example, when we look at Hotep Nation is completely what they would say colorblind. I recognize you might be a white man, an Asian man, Chinese man, Hispanic man, whatever that is. But if you're Hotep, you're Hotep, right? So that is um, our grouping, so to speak, and that is our mission is to move in a way where people are operating based upon ideas and not skin color. If I were to zoom out and be objective and talk about, okay, well, what's good for the black race? Well, the black race has to be good for the black race. Hoteps can't save the black race. Hoteps can save Hoteps, regardless of skin color. But when we break it down to even Indians, like when you deal with Indian, you got the Brahmin class and then you got the lower class, right? And a lot of that stuff is based around skin color. You might be too dark to be in the upper echelons of society, even in India. So colorism is always going to play a part in our current state of society, and you have to take a real hard look at that and think about these things from a realistic standpoint and not an idealistic. You can't just wave a wand and say, "Hey, these things shouldn't matter." You can say that, but they do matter. They do manifest, and they are real. So, how do you circumvent that? Well, it's going to be a series of steps, and step one is that down group, the group that's below, has to begin to organize. And once they begin to organize, they can create a state of equality or supremacy. Because at some point they're going to equalize their competition and then they're going to surpass them. There is no state of equality anywhere on the earth except in the balancing of atoms at some point. Um, like the carbon atom, right? 6 electrons, 6 neutrons, whatever, right? 6 protons. Um, and all the different elements of the planet. There are certain points of equality as far as that's concerned, but as far as humans are concerned, some people are going to be supreme, some people are just going to be very basic. But I can make that differentiation between skin color and Hotep. If you Hotep and you're part of our group, I'm not looking at you and saying, yo, this is a white man, this is a black man. I'm looking at you, yo, this is a Hotep. Hoteps come first. But if we zoom out and people ask me, because I'm a black man, what do I think to do with the issues of black people? I don't think any other group is going to be able to help.
Usman,
I think what we get,
say something, bro.
I think because
just very quickly, Avi is waiting.
Yeah, but very, very quickly.
Oh, no, wait. Avi's waiting in the waiting room. I'm going to let you come in, and then I'm going to tell Brother Brian that we then have to let Avi in. You're welcome to stay with us, but we have to speak to Avi about the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, look, let me make this point here.
Yeah.
The work that I've been doing for the last 20 years has been about this othering. Yeah, whether it was like with those guys from Al Qaeda all the way through to ISIS and within the communities. And one thing that I always found about this, if you look at Philip Zimbardo's work, which where you talk about the red t-shirts, blue t-shirts, or the experiment that he did where he just got students and separated them into prisoners and security guards, yeah, and all it was about putting on a uniform. This idea of othering starts with the conditioning that happens in the nursery system within the West. Yep. The issue we have with this, and this is the whole point with this, Brian, it's like I've noticed all of these activism movements trying to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. But the problem with reinventing the wheel that doesn't have La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah on it is you got a little chip in it. Do you understand? These wheels that are being reinvented, the 1400 years ago, in Islam you have the point where they pointed to the Prophet Muhammad's great friend called Bilal, who they said he was black as ebony. Yeah? And the Arabs were complaining. They were saying, "Oh, why have you got this man who isn't from us announcing prayer?"
The call to prayer is from him.
Yeah, and what ended up happening is there's a there's a famous story about how that morning the Prophet, he goes, okay, just this one time you guys can do your call to prayer, so there's a bit of fairness, because so there wasn't this favoritism, and the sun didn't come up, and the angel Gabriel comes down to Prophet Muhammad, and he goes, God has said until Bilal does the call to prayer, the sun won't come up. Yep. Now remember, the moral truth behind the story is the idea of, and it says that in the Quran, it goes, we made you different so you could come to know each other. Yep. And what I'll tell you, my experience this, Brian, is I've got brothers of mine who are white, black, or whether it's from the MMA, whether it's from the community stuff. But what happens with this is where it has to be in a globalized state. Any person watching this, there has to be a level of going, look, when you sit down with them and you sit down and hear their experiences, there's a level of going, okay, look, you can raise yourself up. And the problem we get with this, when we start thinking, okay, my group, that group, yeah, our thing with this is, even we don't have this thing of this person's going to hell, this person's going to heaven. We got the good news for you. Everyone's on their way to the fun fair. But what's your excuse for being evil? And that's it, I think.
Yeah,
Best way.
we've got to let Avi in, but Brother Brian, I'm going to let you say anything as a concluding remark, because of course you're our guest and we are very happy to have you here with us and we welcome you. And then we're going to bring Avi in. You're welcome to stay and listen to what Avi has to say. You're welcome to leave. I don't know your schedule, but I want to allow you the opportunity to wrap up your
But
remarks.
also invite you, brother, in person for some food.
We'd love to.
I'd love to.
UK, Aki, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I'd love to. I noticed that the problem is thinking, and a lot of times people's minds are full of brain fog. So I produced a new product called Master Focus, which is 100% herbal nootropic at trymasterfocus.com. And use coupon code 10OFF. You can get $10 off of your cart. And I invite people to check that out. It's something that I use daily to basically repair what damage I've done to my memory, my focus, my concentration. But it's a mood enhancer. It gives you a little bit of energy, but overall great for productivity. So if you want to grind in and get more hours out of your day, I highly suggest our product, Master Focus, at trymasterfocus.com.
All right, my brother. Listen, we want to thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome anytime to come and appear with us on this show. If ever you come through London, you let us know. We'd love to sit and eat with you. And which city are you based in?
I'm in New Brunswick.
All right. Well, if ever we come through that way, I don't know if we have any plans so far, but if ever we do, we'll let you know. But if you're coming through London, which is perhaps more likely, then we'd love to sit with you and carry on. And as I say, let's stay in touch, brother. Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome to continue watching in the waiting room. You can leave if you need to. It's up to you, but you're welcome to stay. Don't feel like you have to log off and not listen to our next guest.
All right, no problem, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, brother. Take care.
Our pleasure.
That was all right, wasn't it? Right, we're going to bring in Avi, and he's going to speak to us about the World Economic Forum because he's just been reporting from there, and he had some viral moments because, true to his form and style, some of you may follow his work. I call it gonzo journalism. And all I mean by that is literally running down the street with a microphone, finding the CEO of fucking Pfizer, and saying, hey, why don't you tell the world why you're killing people through myocarditis? And it's just amazing work they're doing. So I want to bring in Avi from Rebel News to tell us more about what they've been doing. Welcome, brother. How are you? Good to see you safe. But let me kick off with this, Avi. Let me kick off with this. You went back to Australia and they took your passport from the airport, right? What the fuck?
That was my family forum, and I thought it'd be a lot harder. I didn't think I'd have as much happen last time at the end. And the success the first time around, nothing changed. These people are so I guess
listen, you've got some interference in your sound. You've got some interference in your sound. Are you on a Wi-Fi or is it what is it you're on?
Can I pull out the mic? Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better. Much better. Yeah. So they took your passport at the airport.
Yeah. last time. That was the first time I went to the world when I, passport, and I thought, in fact, I didn't go directly through. So they're probably going to get me there. It was just as easy. In fact, thought the first time
Bro,
round.
can you hear
it?
Yeah, bro, we can't hear you. It's gone. Do you want to try come out and come back in again on a new connection? Yeah, we'll talk in the meanwhile because we want to hear all of this, and it's going to be frustrating for our viewers if we can't. We'll chat to you in a second, bro. Anyway, so that was a nice chat, wasn't it, with Brian?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was it's interesting. What ends up happening? When you're trying to build something from the start again.
Yeah, I know.
You got me?
Yeah,
And
I know. It's why I asked about Malcolm X and Hajj Malik al-Shabazz because
no. That's why. When you brought that point in, but I think what ends up happening is you can't use the methodology of the oppressor.
Yeah.
Against the oppressor. Do you see what I mean? That's the point that I was making there. But look,
let's see if we can get Avi back a minute. All right, bro. Try to say something.
Is that better?
Now we can't hear anything. Yeah. Are you on Wi-Fi or is this Ethernet connection? Yeah, it's really bad. Can you hear him, bro? Can you hear him, Usman?
No, it's
there we
it's
go.
odd,
That
is
should
it?
be better.
Yeah. What did you do?
Yeah.
It's 6:30 a.m. So excuse me. I pressed the unmute button.
Oh.
I never claimed to be a genius.
Listen, let me start again, right? Because I want people to hear this. They took your passport at when you came back from Davos. They took your passport at the airport in Australia.
That was the first time round. So remember, they did the World Economic Forum in May because they skipped, I think, a year due to the pandemic. So they did one in the summer. It's usually in the winter. This time they caught up. The first time I went back, we had great success the first time, and they pulled us up straight in the airport, took my passport, and I was a little bit nervous this time, Maajid. I thought they'll change the entire system. In fact, I didn't fly through Zurich because I thought I was paranoid. And they're such arrogant people, the ruling class, that they didn't change a thing, and it was just as easy. In fact, I was standing there with Ezra and we were talking about, imagine if Maajid was here. You would clean up the conversations there, just because I think you have a bit of that spirit as well. They're just there. You have full access to them. Like, this is one place where the richest, the most powerful, the political leaders, they all converge on, and they just walk around thinking that they're in this kind of safe bubble, which they were until now. It's not a cheap place to get to.
Let me ask you about some of the events, because I've been following you with great interest from last time, as you remember, to this time. And the reason I thought when they took your passport was because the tweet resurfaced, but maybe it was the old tweet. But let me show you some of the headlines and have you react to them, because you've just been there. So what we're learning of now, this isn't new, but the new development is what I'm about to tell you. Now, at the time, you can see that was January the 16th. And it says George Soros has just pulled out of the 2023 WEF forum in Davos following Klaus Schwab's similar exit this past Friday. Now, it turns out Schwab did end up attending, but the latest is today is reported that there's been a bit of a rebellion within the WEF, and they're trying to kick him out as chairman, and now he's being forced out, and apparently he will stand down. Is that the latest? Have you caught any of that while you were out?
Honestly, I didn't. I wasn't following that side of the story. I did. That was coming from outside a bit. I know there were people reporting that he wasn't coming. There were other A-listers that didn't come. I think over the next couple of years, hopefully, if we have any success, you're going to see that. And I believe it's got more to do with public. The public response from, it doesn't matter the left and right. That's one thing you saw there. There were two groups protesting this event this year. It was your left and your right, almost making the same argument. Of course, the left were trying to differentiate their argument, saying that they're not. It's not because of the conspiracy puppet masters or whatever, like but they were making exactly the same arguments. So I think it was just, and so I think in the future you're going to see more and more of these A-listers avoid it, especially to begin with political figures, because at the end of the day, it's the optics for them, and they won't really want their base seeing them go to this place that is so hated by both groups. Whether Schwab is going to step down or that, you know what? Does it really matter? I think we put too much focus on this one guy. I don't think he is I don't think it specifically starts and ends with him. It's the entire institution. It is corrupt.
Now, let me show you this one as well. I don't know if you caught this, because I don't know if you went inside. I did see footage of you on the streets. I don't know if you were in the conference itself, but Andrew Lawton was, and he's tweeted, everyone at the World Economic Forum annual meeting, including journalists and participants, has to take a PCR test upon arrival. If you don't take a test, the chip in your ID badge is deactivated. If you test positive for COVID, the badge is also deactivated. Did you catch any of those shenanigans going on?
Yeah, so Andrew's a great guy, and he did some great reporting. In fact, the first time I went, it was me and him on the street, and then this time he actually got in. I think much to his shock as well as mine. But he does some really good work, and I encourage your viewers to actually go and check out his Twitter. Ezra spoke also to the head of COVID for the WEF, the person who COVID management at the WEF, and they confirmed all that. I think she was claiming that everyone, no matter who, including Klaus, has to do that. But I believe that realistically, some of the A-listers, they don't actually do it, which is no surprise. Yeah. But yeah, that's their big, and it was interesting to see the reaction to Andrew's tweet, because you had normal people going, "Oh my goodness, they're still playing this COVID theater," and then you had those people that on political lines believe COVID is still going to end the world. They were saying, you see, the people controlling the world, they believe COVID is still a real threat, but they don't want to do anything for us. It's insanity.
So they spun it.
Yeah.
They spun
it. That's on Andrew's.
Yeah.
That's the reaction to Andrew's tweet I found most interesting from that story.
That is very interesting. Now, we have in the UK our list of attendees there. Basically, Keir Starmer, by the way, number 2 there, leader of the opposition. In other words, so-called leader of the Labour Party, though there's not much Labour left in them. He's tipped to be the next Prime Minister. He attended, which is very interesting. And what's even more interesting is the head of our MI6, the chief of the Secret Intelligence Service, Richard Moore, was in attendance. And of course, we all know the last on the list there, Tony Blair, because he gave that speech, didn't he, saying that we need to set up the infrastructure for vaccine passports. He's still obsessed with digital IDs. But Avi, one of the videos that I was most impressed by, and why I initially wanted you on here, is because I saw you guys, gonzo journalist Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer. Tell us about how that went. What his reaction was and how you found that experience.
Yeah, it was surreal, that moment, because you got to remember, we stand there, we're not invited, so we don't have the access, for example, that Andrew had, where you can go in the back rooms of the WEF. There's still restrictions. It's not just straightforward. It depends who you are. If you're CNBC, then your access is obviously a lot easier, because everybody's willing to talk to you, and they know they can. The WEF as an institution knows they can control you, so they're not too worried. But we have to stand out there, especially in the winter, in the freezing cold, hours on end. And the way it works is they all wear their IDs like a class system, where, especially if they're important, they want everyone to know, and it's all color coded. So these white name badges. So you first need to spot the white name badge, then you need to read the name, and it also has the company. So, but you have to Google it. It all happens really quickly. It's very easy to walk away from that and think, oh, I just should have asked that question. Usually you get 1 or 2 questions and it's over. With him, we were standing at the entrance to the actual the Congress, and we'd been there probably for I think 3-4 hours. It was already way past lunchtime, and I'm like, I'm not leaving till. And he was literally on my hit list, and I thought I'd only get one question. The day before that, I got the CEO of AstraZeneca, and I was just kicking myself because he was walking the wrong way. He was walking into Congress, meaning that there's a security barrier there that if you don't have any of the passes, you can't get past it. That's why I just had to let him go. But the CEO of Pfizer was walking out onto the promenade, which means no matter where they're going, you've got at least 20 meters, but you've got up to a kilometer. Depends where on the promenade he's going to give a speech or whatever it is. And he stands there. My cameraman actually turns and goes, we're dead. We're freezing. He turns and goes, isn't that? And you just see Ezra just turns around.
Yeah.
And that's where the video starts. Ezra just walks straight up to him. And, anyone that's done anything similar to this will know the adrenaline dump is quite quick and hard. And you just, my brain freezes. And I'm pretty quick in interactions. Once I'm calm, I can work with it. But you're thinking, all that anger from 2 years all builds up. You get this adrenaline dump. You think, this is the guy. Yeah. And suddenly I couldn't think. And me and Ezra are just taking turns asking questions, and we were discussing it later. We're thinking it was really good for each other. Just, we have totally different styles, and, I have all the respect in the world. I watched that video. I think, God, Ezra asked all the great questions. I was just kind of being, at some points a little bit of a smartass. I asked him if he thinks he should be criminally charged. And afterwards I'm watching, I go, what a ridiculous way to frame that question. It would be better to turn around and go, many around the world think you should be criminally charged. What would you say to that?
By the way,
I'm just
crimes we have long stated here in radical media, crimes against humanity, just to make that very clear. They are crimes against humanity.
I think it's a valid question. I just think the way that I framed it, and obviously, but it does end the way it does. And if you'd watched the first time around, and I think it's one of my proudest moments, especially within the WEF, was David Nabarro, who's, I'm sure you know who he is. He was the special convoy for COVID for the WHO, and the same sort of thing happened when I got him last time. I had that brain freeze, and then he started walking, and I had a really good one-on-one with him where I challenged him on the whole vaccine mandates and all of that. But that's kind of the way it played out. This one has obviously resonated with millions around the world. Facebook and Instagram obviously banned it. Twitter has let it go. In fact, Elon's comment on it, and we've seen all the reports. My inbox is full.
Just to stop you there, credit where it's due, because I'm known to criticize him where I feel he deserves it.
Yep.
Credit where it's
due.
And he just put out this tweet after what you did. I think is when he admitted that his first jab gave him severe chest pain. Right? It was after what you guys did. So
I got to say, through our week at the WEF, he was talking about all the things we were reporting on. He was talking about citizen journalists, and there was, the only stuff he was kind of commenting was ours. So you could see him on the sideline essentially cheering us on, and I could see the reports from the mainstream media, condemning him for that. So I think, absolutely credit where credit is due. And right now it sits on Twitter at 19.7 million, and that has to do with, I think it landed at 7.3 million, which is huge already. Like, that just shows the world public interest in that, and people were just excited to see him be challenged. But then when I said on there that it had been banned from YouTube and Facebook, which was to be expected, anyone that works uses these platforms, especially within our position, they know that it was going to, you'd expect this to be banned. He commented on it, and boom, today it's got 19.7, I think right now it's sitting on, which is more than we would have got even if it was allowed. So Facebook and YouTube actually helped us, because they prompted me to make that comment, which then caused Elon to engage in the way he did, which now we're sitting where we are. And I think the lesson also for the CEO is that you're not even safe in Davos. When you come out in public, his facial expression was shocked.
Yeah.
Like, he's obviously heard these rumors because he was discussing it. He was discussing it inside in the World Economic Forum, and he was kind of belittling people that are making any sorts of claims. I think his wording was, I think it was something along the lines of it being one of the biggest stumbling blocks for Pfizer was people questioning the efficacy, which is mind blowing. But yeah, and then he's there and he's walking down the street and you watch his face and you think he can't believe what was happening. He got so thrown that at a point he walks. If you watch the video when we're chasing him down and we're just pummeling him with questions, he walks into this corner and he gets literally cornered into like a fence, and they're like, "Oh no, you need to come this way," and like he's just lost. So I think it was satisfying on several levels. Not it is my job, but also like everyone, I went through this for the last 3 years, and there was a lot of built up frustration and anger, and directed, I think, rightly at him.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, because you're so vocal on this stuff, and it's really refreshing, by the way, to hear, because, of course, we are very candid, as you know, on the work we do, but it's refreshing to see the balls that you show in the work because you've been attacked, haven't you? I mean, go back to, you mentioned the anger boiling up, because in Australia, when before you were even able, or anyone was able to travel, you were doing the same thing, the same gonzo journalist style approaches, but to the Australian officials that were enforcing COVID mandates. And because we had tried to get you on the show once before, and of course the timings wouldn't work out, but it's an opportunity to actually allow our viewers to understand that this isn't something new. You've been doing this in the days of COVID mandate lockdowns and vaccine mandates, and mind you, where in Australia, which is, I'd say, third worst. You got Canada, New Zealand, Australia, then the UK, then the US. I mean, it was in that order for me out of the five.
I think I think it depends where you are. I think it depends where in Canada compared to where you. I think Melbourne, where I'm based, I would consider, definitely in the top 3. We were the most lockdown city in the world. Yeah. And I think to remind myself, I actually pinned the tweet of the apology from Victoria Police, which I had to fight for in court. I was arrested 3 times for doing my work, for doing this. Yeah. Attending, protests and covering it and confronting political figures. We went to court a number of times, and that one specifically, they apologized for admitting that, I was doing my job. They don't have to necessarily like it, and even within the framework of their made up restrictions at the time for our health, I was still abiding by everything. And I guess that's why I'm so angry, because I towed the line in the way that I could stand in front of a judge and say, I followed every one of these crazy restrictions. I did everything right, and still they went after me, and still the entire mainstream media were against me, and they were kind of encouraging the government. And I get why. In fact, I absolutely get why the mainstream media wanted to silence me. It wasn't because they were scared of the virus. It was because they were pissed off that we were getting all the eyeballs at the time, because that's all it is for them. You got to look at everyone and how they approached COVID, the pandemic. Everybody had their reasons for why they supported the government, the narrative, and all that. And I think a lot of the mainstream media, you look at them through COVID, they've never had such high ratings. And then when they see someone like me walk in and showing the other side from the front, we were stealing all their eyeballs, and they were like, let's put an end to this. They were mocking what we were doing, saying it's not real journalism. And, I have a friend here as well, Rukshan, who was literally live streaming all the events, live streaming. So you can't even question. He was commentating on it, but it was live. So as the viewer, there was nothing more accurate. And they were trying to hammer it, saying it's not journalism what he's doing. Yeah. So, yeah, it was fit. I joined Rebel News on the 3rd of September of 2020, and that was mid-lockdown. And the 5th of September was my first arrest, where they tackled me to the ground. It was all pretty and I think the police at the time thought they could get away with it because they thought I was more independent. They didn't know that I'd joined Rebel, and I guess they hadn't met Rebel and they hadn't met Ezra's style of litigation where anything
Ezra
happens.
and I spoke about that very point when I was cancelled, because of course he was one of the very kind friends around me who was there to offer support, and he said, if you were with Rebel News, he said, look at Avi and what happened to him. He said that we make sure we cover all of the legal costs. Yeah. So Ezra covered your legal costs, did he, in that situation?
Absolutely. We crowdfund. Everything we do at Rebel is crowdfunding, and so it's really the viewers, but obviously Ezra has to walk in there and put $100,000 down straight away, whether we're gonna manage to crowdfund it or not. And I've certainly had some big wins, but I've had some losses. I tried to go to the press conferences for Daniel Andrews, the premier here, that was doing all this, and no one was challenging him. So I attended his press conference, and at the press conference I was arrested, and we went to court, and I lost on a technicality of the fact that it's in parliamentary privilege, so a dictator can act like a dictator within those parliamentary grounds just because of an old English law about, again, parliamentary privilege, so that they get to rule that specific place. I don't think that was the intention of the law. The intention was so that the judicial doesn't interfere with the workings of Parliament, so with creating laws or whatever. But it is what it is, and Ezra's always been there. No matter what, the first reaction you have when you get into trouble, or I've got into trouble here at Rebel, and I've got into a fair bit of trouble over COVID, was who do we sue and where do we do it, and how quick can we make it happen? So, absolutely.
Now, bro, am I imagining it, or did I catch you commenting on our Andrew Bridgen situation here in the UK? The MP that was kicked out of the Conservative Party for questioning vaccine mandates.
Oh, I didn't. No, that wouldn't be me.
Right. Okay. Well, you're aware what happened. I hope, at least, if you followed it. One of our MPs here questioned in Parliament. He questioned the excess death in the UK, which is now pretty much established, and suggested that vaccines may be responsible for that. And in that context, said that he believes this is the greatest crime to have been committed since the Holocaust. Now, the letter that he was...
Oh, yeah, I did comment on that.
You did.
The name.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted to ask you. Let me show you this headline. This is from Sky News at the time. MP Andrew Bridgen has Tory whip removed after comparing COVID vaccines with the Holocaust. Now, the thing is, before I throw my question to you, Brother Abbey, he didn't compare them to the Holocaust. He said...
No. In fact, he's saying that the Holocaust is bad. Since.
That's right. He used the word since. So I want to ask you, because you're Jewish, did you find anything he said anti-Semitic?
No, look, absolutely not. Firstly. Secondly, if you actually read what he's saying, he's saying that the Holocaust is a bad thing. He's saying since the Holocaust. I don't understand that, people don't have comprehension, but they choose. And, the Jewish community as well is divided. Some are really sensitive. You just can't mention the Holocaust. You can't say anything about the Holocaust. And then there's the funny thing is when you talk about the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, they were saying the same things. You know, when here in Melbourne, when they were shutting down the synagogues on Yom Kippur, and the ultra-Orthodox were forced to climb from roof to roof. I don't know if you remember these videos. They were kind of funny. They were making like TikToks of, you had these people in black and white, jumping from roof to roof just to get into the synagogue. And the cops just, blocked off the entrances and charged them. When I went to that community and I was interviewing them, they were all comparing it to the Holocaust. Yeah. And these people, they're all second generation, third generation Holocaust survivors. They're Eastern European Jews that literally moved to Australia from that. So it's complete nonsense that anybody says that it was anti-Semitic, and two, look, you don't have to like it. You don't have to like the comparison. I think like I did it myself. When we were out and about and I was reporting, I would say to the cops, stop acting like the Gestapo, and I would at the time, even within my own family, people totally agreed with me. And some of my family said, "Oh, you shouldn't make."
It's a perfectly valid comparison. Perfectly valid comparison.
And you know what? And people like in my family, where some of them would go, "Oh, just don't make that comparison," just because they're uncomfortable with it. But nobody ever claimed that I was anti-Semitic for making it. They just didn't like it. And fine, you can be sensitive about it. It doesn't really bother me. But the idea that he's kicked out and I pointed this out yesterday, because one of the things with the excess deaths we're talking about in Australia a lot now, because they've just come out with the number. I think it's 17% now in Australia of excess death, dying of stroke, heart attack, sudden death, and that they're blaming on. It's just so crazy. They're blaming it on COVID. They're saying it's COVID. The cause is COVID. But one thing I don't get, and no one's really talking about, going, and I tweeted this out yesterday because it just dawned on me. You guys are making the argument on both sides. You're saying it wasn't the vaccine, it was COVID, and the vaccine is so great. So either it was the vaccine and the vaccine is killing people, or the vaccine's not as efficient as you're claiming, because all these people are dying from COVID. And like, I just don't get why that's not right now one of the biggest questions in the air. We all know it makes no sense that it's COVID, but pretend for a second. Let's pretend for a second that your made up version of the story is true. Then why are you not questioning the vaccine anyways? No matter which way you look at it, you need to be questioning the vaccine.
Right? Clearly didn't work.
It either doesn't work, or it's dangerous. Which one is it? And either of them, why did we force people to get it? And why are we still forcing people to get into America? You still got to be vaccinated. Why? When either it doesn't work or it's dangerous.
I mean, that's a very good way of looking at it, and a nice way of summarizing the question, actually, Abby, because unfortunately, you may have noticed people have suspended their thinking around these questions.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you know, there is a silver lining, I think, Maajid, to all of this, and I'm a bit grateful for it, because I think in the last 3 years, I've grown more than I did in my 33 years prior. I think I realized, the way my outlook on the world, even our relationship, before COVID, I remember you and I had a spat, and I look at a lot of my political behavior.
VC.
Yes. So I look a lot of my political behavior, and I'm a bit embarrassed about the pre-COVID me, just because I think it was, even things like the way I looked at counterterrorism laws, and the way that I, blindly followed the government narrative, both here and in Israel. And I'm not, I love Israel to death, but I think, just the behavior of Bibi Netanyahu over the last few years taught me, okay, man, you can really criticize Israel. You can criticize policy and still love the country, just like I can criticize here in Australia. And I think that, a lot of criticism is needed to all these leaders and all these governments and everybody. And today, I look at everything a lot more skeptically, and I don't judge anybody on where or what they come from. In fact, I think COVID's opened dialogues for me. You and I, the fact that we're talking after, I think our engagement before COVID was probably a lot more hostile. But it's not just you and me. I find that, across the board. You know how many times I went to these protests and I was covering them, which was interesting, because they were getting painted as they called them little Nazi babies here or something. That was the label that the media and the political. But when I went there, it was honestly, you couldn't put them into a box. Lockdown protesters did not fit a certain. But if I had to tell you, they certainly weren't white. The majority were ethnic, and we're a very multicultural society in Melbourne. It's a melting pot here, but the majority of people that went there were often people that came from countries that had suffered, and they just they saw something in what was happening that either spurred on a memory, or that it was something they were taught about never to accept. And I would attend these protests, and a lot of time I would get large groups of Muslim guys going, "Look, Avi, I love your work, I hate your stance on Israel, but good on you for what you're doing with COVID." And it would create a crazy environment where I was able, on the side, not even on camera, to have discussions about something that we totally disagree on, and but in a way that it was a mutual respect that we would have never really had. I guess there has to be some sort of silver lining. That was my personal one.
That is
the
I mean,
last
Usman,
few years.
let me bring you in. I mean, we've noticed that post-COVID, the way in which you and I even started working more closely together, because the world's never, it's not the same, is it? It's never
Well, you got to remember that, pardon me, before COVID, what happened is, Avi, I had my own awakening from the perspective that I'd been running a big intervention pilot for the government, which was highly successful. And then I got told, we don't care if it works. We want to bring in other people. I said to them, look, if you bring in other people, people are going to get killed. So we stepped away in protest and ended up with the whole mechanism of attack coming after us, because we knew where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. And me and Maajid were having this conversation while everything's going on. And then, strangely enough, COVID came into play as well. And it just developed deeper and deeper, didn't it, Maajid? Because
so what you were saying about the terrorism laws, Avi, right? Well, Usman and I, because this is the background we come from, we for a long time were saying to each other, around us, these people are never going to stop. They're going to start with, say, counter ISIS powers. They're going to end with the everyday citizen, and we're going to end up in some form of empire. And we were saying, because we saw that from the inside, how it was evolving, that eventually they're going to say that their political opponents are terrorists. And then, of course, Jan 6 happens, and the whole thing unfolds. And it's why, when I was on Rogan, I said it openly. I said, this is the problem. The direction of travel has only been going one way. When they take these powers, they never give them back. And now we can see it. We can see it manifest. And the problem they all have with Usman and I, and you're going to see this as well, bro, is that when you've seen how the cookie's cut from the inside, then it's incredibly dangerous for them, which is why we get called dangerous now all the time, because we can articulate exactly the problem with the system, having been at the forefront of protecting people. So it's not like we don't love them. You know, we're the ones, if you want to know who's stopped the worst, most atrocious terrorist plots around the world, in Britain, who's trained the people in the US when it comes to understanding terrorism, whether it's at Homeland Security, whether it's at the FBI, whether it's at New York Counterterrorism Police, whether it's at West Point, or whether it's with heads of state, who has gone to speak to them with love to say
no one comes close to what we've.
And now we're saying,
Avi, they don't even come close to what we've done. Not even literally. The terrorism academics. The way it's been said to me is,
we built a cognitive framework in which they currently operate, Usman.
Yes,
that's the matter. Yeah,
that's the fact.